You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of sound. A dimension of sight. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
Welcome to the first matchup in the best TV show ever tournament, which is going to be a very long tournament that I hope you all will watch along with me and vote along with me, because your vote could matter. I know I might sound like a politician during this project, but every vote counts. If you're a fan of one of these TV shows, or you just want to start watching these TV shows with me, your vote could choose which one wins these best of 7 matchups. Now remember, this is a best of 7 matchup, so you need 4 wins. A TV show needs 4 wins to advance further in the tournament. Our first matchup is old TV shows, Bewitched versus the Twilight Zone. Definitely, probably 2 classics. The Twilight Zone started way back in 1959, Bewitched in 1964. We're going to go ahead and start with the Twilight Zone. It is 2 episodes of the Twilight Zone versus 4 episodes of Bewitched. Now, all of the matchups will have different number of episodes for each show, because it all depends on how many episodes they had altogether. As this tournament goes on, you will see that only 2 shows will actually be fully watched within this tournament. Although if I do like a show, I might keep making videos on them. We'll see what happens with this process. I'm really just winging it. It's an idea I've had for a long time. I've tried to put together different ways to do this tournament. Some of those ways didn't work out, so I'm just gonna go at it alone, and we're going to see what comes of this tournament. Now, the 2 episodes we're watching of Twilight Zone, I feel like the first episode, the pilot episode, gets higher rated than the second episode. But to me, the second episode was far better than the first. The pilot episode is Where Is Everybody?, where this character named Mike basically wakes up all alone. Twilight Zone is where every episode is a kind of a new story that deals with sci-fi or the supernatural, to either really make you think or maybe scare you, I guess. I don't really know. I don't really know if we'll get to any scary episodes of the Twilight Zone, but we'll see. But Where Is Everybody is basically this guy waking up in a small town where there's nobody else. He thinks he sees somebody in a car, but it's really just a mannequin.
Look, I don't want you to think I'm nuts or anything. It's just that I don't seem to remember who I am. You're the first person I've seen. Look, I really don't want you to be frightened or anything, but I was wondering if there's a doctor or...
He runs into a station where he sees the book Last Man on Earth, which was a nice touch, and he starts to really believe he is the last man on Earth. In the end, though, he wakes up in a U.S. Army facility where he's hooked up to a bunch of machines, and they kept him alone for 2 weeks hooked up to these machines, and I guess that is where he was lost in his mind. He saw himself as the last man on Earth.
Please, somebody help me! Somebody's looking at me! Somebody's watching me! Help me! Somebody's looking at me! Please help me! Help me! Help me! Please, somebody help me! Somebody's...
Which I think is kind of dramatic for 2 weeks alone. But I've never been 2 weeks completely alone, I guess. I've been alone for 1 week by myself because I'm an only child. But I'm trying to think, would 2 weeks alone really drive me that insane? As an only child, I'm not convinced of that. Not insane enough to be seeing that you're the last man on earth because you're that much of a diva. But I guess when I was alone, I did probably go outside and maybe go to a store and was surrounded by other people. So hey, well, actually I'm reading in my notes, it was actually 2.5 weeks. So maybe that extra half week would cause a person to go insane. But this episode was kind of to really touch upon companionship and loneliness. And it does suck to be lonely out there when you're alone, unless you get really used to it. But even if you're alone, you might buy a pet or something to kind of try and get rid of that loneliness. So I think the concept of this episode, even though I told some jokes about it, to poke fun at it, I get the concept, and I think it was pretty good for the most part. But strong enough to be more than like a C+ grade, I'm not convinced of that. I think the acting in this episode was also subpar. So while I didn't hate this episode, I thought it was just an okay pilot episode for the Twilight Zone. But it seems like a lot of people enjoyed as the first episode. I more so enjoyed episode 2 called One for the Angels, where we have this character named Lou, or Louis J. Bookman. And Lou is visited by Mr. Death.
Occupation pitchman, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Born New York City, 1890.
This gentleman came here to ask me a lot of questions.
What gentleman?
That gentleman.
Now, I think one reason this episode works so well is the acting in it is great. Ed Wynn plays Lou, who is likable right off the bat. Great actor to come off as likable, to say the least. And then Mr. Death is played by Murray Hamilton, who I think also played his role very good. And those are the two main characters in this episode. But even the little girl, the one scene she's in, I thought she was really endearing too. I don't know the actress's name. But even the little girl that played Maggie was very good in her role. So as I go along in this tournament, I'm going to be interested to see how important acting is to my grading, because I did grade this episode higher than episode 1. And I think a lot of that was the acting, but I did enjoy the story more too. I think there was just more depth to the story, where episode 1 is like this pretty basic story where it's just one person, the last man on earth, and then you have the twist that he's just really alone in an army experiment type thing. Whereas this episode, I think it's kind of basic too, but it's still not as basic as episode 1. So Lou is basically like a salesman, a street vendor. He goes around the sidewalks just selling different things back in 1959. And he seems to be pretty good at it. But Mr. Death visits because his time has come. At midnight, he must come with Mr. Death. Lou doesn't really understand this at first, that this is Mr. Death. And when Maggie comes in for Lou to fix her toy, Maggie is a neighbor's kid. Lou fixes the toy but realizes Maggie can't see Mr. Death. Only Lou can see Mr. Death. And Mr. Death wants to make a deal with Lou, though.
You're Death?
Exactly, Mr. Bookman. There are 3 major categories of appeals. Well, you don't have any unfinished business, do you, Mr. Bookman?
Ah, but I do. Indeed, I do. Between you and me, I never made a truly big pitch.
Mr. Death offers Lou that if there's anything in his life he hasn't accomplished yet, he might let him live a little longer. He gets one last chance to do that. Lou makes a sales pitch that he wants to make the big one. He's never made the big sales pitch in his life, and that's what he wants to do. But Lou uses this deal making with Mr. Death to try and run away and get away from death. He's trying to run from death. Mr. Death keeps popping up to him anyway, so he can't run with death. Mr. Death is upset that Lou is trying to break this deal already, and so he forces Lou's hand kind of by hurting Maggie. If he can't take Lou because Mr. Death made this deal with Lou, and Lou isn't going to hold up his end of the bargain, he's not going to try and make the big deal, then he has to take Maggie instead, and Maggie's hit by a car, and he's going to take Maggie at midnight instead. So,
You're gonna be all right, darling. You're gonna be just fine.
so Lou does work on his big pitch, and he ends up making his big pitch to Mr. Death. And during this big pitch, it really is just a distraction so that midnight will hit and Mr. Death will not be able to make his end of the bargain with Maggie and take Maggie at midnight. This ends up being the big pitch that Lou wanted to make in the first place. And so Maggie's okay. She survives and Lou ends up going with Mr. Death. And by the end, when we see Mr. Death and Lou walking together, it's honestly kind of cute in the end. So I feel like this episode just had a lot of good qualities. It had a good story. It had more to the story than episode 1. It was funny at times. It was endearing. And it even wraps up kind of heartwarming. So big ups to the second episode of Twilight Zone. But I had to put them both together for one grade. And so I gave Twilight Zone an 80. Twilight Zone is going up against Bewitched, which started in 1964. The pilot episode is pretty good. Sol Sachs is the curator. And of course, the main story is that Samantha and Darrin have fallen in love with each other. We get a nice opening sequence of them meeting, falling in love, and marrying. But on the honeymoon, we kind of find out the problem is that Samantha's a witch and Darrin doesn't know. And Endora, Samantha's mother, who is kind of my favorite character, honestly, I find Endora to have some of the funniest lines in the series. Endora doesn't approve that Samantha has married a mere mortal. And we get a pretty funny scene right off the bat where Endora keeps making Darrin disappear back into the hotel lobby before he comes to knock on the door to see Samantha with Endora.
I'll take care of that.
Easy now.
Ooh, I'm not going to hurt him.
Must be the champagne.
So after the visit with her mother, Samantha has to tell Darrin that she is a witch. And Darrin just wants Samantha to be a normal human, a normal housewife from the 60s, which Samantha thinks she can do. But as the episodes go along, we kind of find out that Samantha has a pretty hard time not using magic because magic just makes everything easier.
Sweetheart, we all imagine things. I myself. You may not believe this, but...
Episode 2, entitled Be It Ever So Mortgaged, I believe, is an episode that introduces us to other characters because Darrin's going to buy a house for them, a new house for Samantha and Darrin to move into. But there's a nosy neighbor named Gladys Kravitz, the first, I think, in the nosy neighbor trope that is on television.
Well, come on, Mother. Let's go look at the patio.
Gladys is always looking out the window at the house next door and kind of sees that magic was used because when she looks out the window the first time, the house next door is pretty bare. But while Samantha and Endora are checking out the house, they make flowers pop up, trees pop up. So when Gladys looks outside again, she sees all of this. Gladys tries to tell her husband Abner about this, and Abner just thinks she's crazy. Abner's another pretty funny character for a secondary character. If Endora is not the funniest character to me, it's probably Abner, even though he was only in 2 episodes, I think.
Abner, I
you. Why would I lie to you?
Take another spoonful, Gladys. You'll feel better. Come on, now, open.
I won't open. I want you to listen to me. We've watched that house across the street ever since the day it was built.
You have watched that house since it was built. I got better things to do.
I tell you, Abner, that house has always been empty. Been bango.
Okay, bango. Take the medicine.
It's full of furniture, just like that. Full.
Open.
No more. It's making me nauseous.
Better nauseous than crazy, Gladys. Open.
I'm not crazy, Abner. It was full of furniture, beautiful stuff. Then bango.
Bango, open.
It was gone.
Maybe it was repossessed. Open.
I'm going back there. I'm scared, but I'm going back there. I'm marching up, and I'm gonna knock, and I'm going inside and find out what's going on in there.
Abner's basically an old curmudgeon. He just retires. He doesn't want any stress. He doesn't want to listen to Gladys's qualms about what's happening next door because he's so nosy. Abner just wants her to take her medicine. So I think the character of Gladys, I think it might get old kind of fast, though. The fact that she's going to look crazy because she sees everything happening next door. And I just want to say, I've seen episodes of Bewitched when I was a kid, but not a lot of them. So I don't know how repetitive this Gladys story will get, but it seems like it could get kind of repetitive kind of fast. I did like the end scene where Darrin thinks he's finally going to meet Samantha's mother because they were there looking at the house together. And when there's a door knock, it's actually Gladys, and Darrin mistakes Gladys for his mother-in-law and tries to hug her, and Gladys runs off. Episode 3 deals with the plot of Darrin works for an ad company, and he's trying to get this ad with this creepy older guy. Mr. Barker's his name, and they throw this party at Darrin's new house, and Mr. Barker comes on to Samantha, which I feel like is a serious issue for the 70s because he's coming on pretty strong, and Samantha's telling him to stop. And he's not stopping. So Samantha uses her magic to turn Mr. Barker into a dog.
I just thought you forgot all about me.
Well, nothing of the kind. You're not the sort of man a person can forget about.
Oh, good, good. Look, why don't we sit down and
I'll
talk?
freshen your drink for you.
Well, I don't drink anymore. I don't drink any less, but I don't drink any more.
Let's go inside. It's kind of chilly out here.
I don't want to go inside.
I'm warning you, Mr. Barker. My husband is a very jealous man.
Well,
Mr. Barker, I'm warning you. If you don't get control of yourself, I'm going to do something drastic.
Promise?
What are you doing out here all alone?
Oh, I'm not alone.
Where did you come from?
Oh, he's been around all night making a pest of himself.
The funny part of the episode is that the dog does bark a lot, and his name is Mr. Barker. I think the problem with this episode is we kind of see the misogyny of the 60s start to come through in the character of Darrin, who they get into this argument when he finds out that Samantha turned Mr. Barker into a dog, where Darrin kind of blames Samantha for Mr. Barker doing what he was doing and kind of coming on to Samantha. And I think that made Darrin look really bad. So it will be interesting to see how some of these old shows aged, because I think Darrin comes out of this episode looking really bad. Even though by the end he does see Mr. Barker coming on to Samantha and hits him, I still think Darrin came out of this episode looking bad by blaming Samantha for the situation of Mr. Barker being a total creeper. So that episode, it was iffy. I think that's the iffiest of the first 4 episodes. The final episode in this game 1 of this series between Twilight Zone and Bewitched is Mother Meet What's His Name. I like that this is an old sitcom, and I don't think old sitcoms are known for storylines, like story arcs, I guess. Because there is a story arc within these first 4 episodes of Endora talking a lot of crap about Darrin to Samantha, but they never meet. Endora always leaves or doesn't want to meet Darrin. In episode 4, they finally do meet, and by the end of it, Endora is upset with Darrin for wanting to chain Samantha to not be a witch, that she threatens to turn him into an artichoke.
Ask her to leave her broom outside.
Good evening.
Good evening. Oh, we were just having a drink. Would you care for a cocktail?
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Well, I'd like it much better if you had called me by my first name.
Oh, very well, Dennis.
Darrin, Mother.
Oh, of course. I'd like a very dry martini. Italian vermouth, Spanish gin, and a Greek olive.
Well, I don't think we have any.
Oh, don't bother. I'll fix it myself.
I like Samantha the way she is, Endora. She doesn't need any of that other nonsense.
Nonsense.
Darrin doesn't mean anything.
Darrin, please.
I mean, we don't need those powers of hers.
Samantha is what she is, and that you cannot change.
Mother, I made the decision myself.
Yes, I know. A decision I do not approve.
Samantha and I can handle our problems by ourselves. They're nobody else's business.
Darrin, please.
Are you threatening me?
Not exactly.
Darrin, please understand. Mother means well.
Don't you worry, my poor baby. Your mother will see to it that you're treated properly.
I have every intention of treating her properly without any help or interference from you.
Young man!
Mother, don't.
Very well. Just consider yourself lucky that you are not, at this moment, an artichoke. So from now on, watch your step, young man. Mother is watching you.
Endora threatens Darrin with magic. This episode was good because we did finally see Endora and Darrin meet. I think overall of the 4 episodes, though, I do find Bewitched funny, and when I am grading sitcoms specifically, I will be grading on if they are actually funny. And I mean laugh out loud funny. They need to be laugh out loud funny for me to grade them high in the entertaining category. And I think Bewitched falls into that. So that's why overall it ended up getting a grade of an 82.2. So right now, with my opinion, Bewitched is beating the Twilight Zone in Game 1. But now is your chance to vote, and you can change this Game 1, or you can make Bewitched win by more points. I'm going to put up a poll, but the poll on YouTube only lasts for 24 hours. So you will also have a chance to vote in the comments below. Either if you're gonna watch Bewitched and Twilight Zone, please watch the first 4 episodes of Bewitched and the first 2 episodes of Twilight Zone, and then vote in the comments below. You will have 5 days to vote in the comments. I will combine the votes in the poll and the votes in the comments, and we will see who wins the poll. If one show beats the other by 10% or less, the show that wins gets 3 extra points. If one show wins the poll by 20% to 10%, the show gets 5 extra points. And if they win the poll by more than 20%, the winning show in the poll gets an extra 10 points in this matchup. And right now it's only a 2.2 point difference. So if you got a horse in the race between Bewitched and Twilight Zone, please vote in the comments or vote in the poll that will be going up soon after this video. I hope you will continue to join me for the Best TV Show Ever tournament. I will be back next week with the results of Game 1 of Bewitched versus Twilight Zone.